I understand firsthand the process of getting back on track. Not long ago, I was in the same position as most of you. Throughout my time at Woodrow Wilson High School, I didn't value my education. And most of the time, I didn't go to school. My senior year, I had 63 unexcused absences coupled with a 1.1 GPA on my transcript. I was not supposed to graduate. But the faculty and staff at Woodrow Wilson High School took a chance on me by believing that I could get back on track. And to my credit, I tried to prove them right. A year after graduating from Woodrow Wilson High School, I registered with Camden County College. I didn't have a plan and didn't really know what I wanted to do. That experience didn't last long. Typically, when you plan to fail, or when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So, I reverted back to my old habits while I was at Camden County College. Missing classes, then when I did show up, I wasn't really focused. I dropped out. That was the easy thing to do. 6 months after dropping out of Camden County College, I was incarcerated at the Camden County Jail for 5 felony offenses. Now, if I stop the story here, it would be hard for any of you to imagine that this same individual will go on to graduate from an Ivy League college at the University of Pennsylvania and work at the White House under the first Black president. I couldn't imagine that. I had to learn something throughout my journey and on this process. That failure is not permanent, and no one is exempt from failure. For example, how many people in here know who Bobby Rush is? And if you do know who Bobby Rush is, do you often think of him when you think of Barack Obama? Probably not. But at one point in time, in the year 2000, Bobby Rush defeated Barack Obama in Illinois race for congressman. Fast forward 8 years later, Barack Obama was elected as the first Black president of the United States of America. We all know the story about Michael Jordan getting cut from his high school basketball team and going on to become the best player in the world. Or how Steve Jobs was fired from Apple to only come back and transform the company as we know it today. As I'm quite sure most of you have an iPhone in your hand right now. And I learned that winners don't allow failure to dictate their future or define it. So I made a decision. After I was released from Camden County Jail in February 2009, I decided that I was going to think and believe like a success. And as my mindset changed, I began to become confident in myself, and I registered for Camden County College for a second time. I had a renewed focus. And my new train of thought made me behave like a successful person. I developed a stronger relationship with God. I studied longer. I joined study groups. I sought mentorship, and I asked for help. And throughout this time, I began to develop positive habits. Habits of being on time, being respectful, and valuing myself and valuing my education. Now, when I was at Camden County College, I still didn't believe the things that were going to take place in my life. No one could have predicted that. Most of my Camden County peers were dropping out of college and doing the same things I did when I first registered.
You know, my mother had me when she was 16 years old. You know, over on the east side of Atlanta, and we grew up about 5 minutes away from Turner Field where the Braves play. And it was a 2-bedroom home, and there was 14 of us living there. And I used to sleep on the floor, and I had 8 uncles in that same house, and they did everything under the sun. You know, going in and out of prison, doing different things, and God had blessed me to be, you know, pretty talented. You know, I could shoot basketball with the best of them, I could play baseball, you know, I had a little speed, I could run a little track, but it was something about the game of football where I can hit another individual with everything I had and not get in trouble for it. You know, I fell in love with it. And so I came up with this dream about going to the NFL because I really wanted to help my family and give back to my community. And I loved it so much that, you know, I would play in the street and I would come in the house bloody, and a coach came down the street one day and he signed me and my cousins up because my family couldn't afford to pay for it. And the coach just riding down the street out of the blue one day, he asked me, "You like to play sports?" I said, "Yes, sir." And it was the first white guy I ever met in my life. That's my guy, I love him. I still know him until this day. He still buys me drawers and socks every Christmas until this day. You know, started when I was around 7 years old. And it was a field by the name of Fitzgerald Field. And after practice most nights, it'd be around 10 o'clock sometimes, and my mother, she worked at Wendy's, and she would get off work at Wendy's and I would be about the last kid sitting in the park, and I would be waiting on my mother because I didn't want to go home because, you know, every other day or every other week, our front door would get kicked in because my uncles sold drugs. So every opportunity I got in solitude to cultivate a vision for my life, I took advantage of it. And so I would be sitting in the park and I would wait on my mother, and she used to drive an old beat up Buick Regal, and she would pull into the park at night and she would put her car in park, and I would hop up off the bench, I would sprint over to her, I would kiss her, I would hug her, and I would say, "Mom, if you don't mind, can you please sit back in your car and turn on your car lights? I have to do some extra drills, I have to go to the NFL so you'll never have to work another day in your life." And I knew she was tired, but every night she would sit in that car and those car lights would hit that field, and he had a 7-year-old kid doing backpedaling drills, running sprints, running laps, chasing his dream to go to the NFL. And one night my mother came into the park and I walked off the field and I said, "Can you please introduce me to my father?" Because I played every sport, and every sport I played, we had to show our birth certificates. And so every time I pulled out my birth certificate, I would always see my mother's name, but I never saw my father's name, and so it bothered me. And so she said, "Sure." And so my first encounter with my father, I shook his hand. I said, "Hey man, how you doing?" He said, "Hey little man." He said, "Man, I heard you could really play sports." I said, "Thanks, I heard you can too." I said, "But here's what I need you to do for me. I need you to pick me up every Friday night, work me out every Saturday morning, and you can take me back home after that. I don't need any money, I don't need any clothes. I just need to make it to the NFL so I can help my mother and my grandmother. Can you do that?" He said, "Yeah, I got you." And so he picked me up one Friday night. The first Saturday morning, he shakes me. It's 4 a.m. in the morning. I wake up, I'm wiping the cold out of my eyes. He said, "Little man, you said you wanted it, right?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Get up. We're running 2 miles to this fire station, 2 miles back home." I said, "Okay, let's do it." And every Saturday it became like clockwork. We would get up, run 2 miles, 2 miles back. And so once I caught the rhythm, I said, man, one Saturday I said, "I'm gonna beat him out to the line." We had a line in the street where we were starting, so I ran out to the line and I'm waiting on him. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm standing there, and my father, he comes out of the garage. And so he walks by me and he busted a U-turn and he looked up at me. He said, "Son," I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I want you to pull that other person outside of you today." I said, "Yes, sir." And he walks by me again. He said, "Son," I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I want you to pull that other person outside of you today." I said, "Yes, sir." But in my mind, I don't see another person, and it's dark. So I really don't know what he's talking about, and I'm thinking he's trying to talk his way out of it. And so the third time he said, "Son," I stepped back. I said, "Listen, Dad, no disrespect." I said, "But I don't see another person." I said, "So I understand we have different lives and you have a job, and so if you're tired, I get it. You can go back in the house and you can go to sleep, but you're not stopping me from running to this fire station. I'm running to this fire station whether you go or not." And he looked at me, and what he said to me, it pierced my heart in such a way. He said, "Son, what I'm trying to get you to understand is no matter how hard you work, there is somebody on the inside of you that works even harder." He said, "No matter how dedicated you are, there is somebody on the inside of you that's more dedicated. No matter how committed you are, there is somebody on the inside of you that's more committed, and you don't even know what commitment is yet. You think commitment is just saying, 'Yes, I'll do it,' but what commitment is staying true to what you said you were going to do long after the mood that you have set it in has left, meaning on the days when you don't feel like doing what you said you would do, you get up and you do it anyway. That's what builds character." And he said, "I need you to understand the concept that there's another person on the inside of you, because one day in your life you will face something that's a lot tougher than you, and your strength and your drive and your commitment and your work ethic won't do it. You will have to realize that it's something on the inside of you that's greater than anything that life can throw at you." And immediately I got it. And so when I got to the University of Tennessee, I was extremely grateful to be able to play the game of football, but I was extremely grateful just to be able to go to college. I was the first one in my family to go to college, broke a generational curse. I was just grateful. And when my life changed behind the game of football, it was something that I didn't understand. But when it changed behind the game of football, I was grateful because I understood the work, the level of work that I had put in ever since I was 7 years old. Football is something that's a blessing because it's a controlled setting. You can go out, have a bad practice, come back next week, have a good practice, make it up, have a bad game, come back, have a good game, make it up. It's a controlled setting. It allows you to build your character. So one day when you face a real life situation, you can reveal your character and what you're really made out of. And so when my life changed, not only did my football career end, I got a paralyzed right arm and hand behind it. Life changed overnight. But I was extremely grateful for it because the whole time I understood, Inky, there's another person on the inside of you that you have to tap into in order to get through one of the darkest, toughest, roughest moments of your life. But ultimately, Inky, everything happens for a reason, and you have to understand you've been dealt this. You've been dealt this adversity, this opposition, and this challenge because somebody in the world needs to see you get through it so it can serve as a blessing to someone else. And so as I stand right here before you and I tell you I'm grateful and I'm thankful, I'm grateful and I'm thankful. I have friends out there that poured into me, friends that I'm extremely grateful for. Condrich Holloway, after I got injured, he pulled me in his office every day and poured into me. He didn't have to do that. And so every day of my life, the way that I live my life is to give the people that invested in me and saw something in me when I couldn't see it in myself, a return on their investment. I feel it's my responsibility to add value to every person's life that come in contact with me in every environment that I go into.
When I was 27 years old, I left a very demanding job in management consulting for a job that was even more demanding, teaching. I went to teach 7th graders math in the New York City public schools. And like any teacher, I made quizzes and tests, I gave out homework assignments. When the work came back, I calculated grades. What struck me was that IQ was not the only difference between my best and my worst students. Some of my strongest performers did not have stratospheric IQ scores. Some of my smartest kids weren't doing so well. And that got me thinking, kinds of things you need to learn in 7th grade math, sure, they're hard. Ratios, decimals, the area of a parallelogram. But these concepts are not impossible. And I was firmly convinced that every one of my students could learn the material if they worked hard and long enough. After several more years of teaching, I came to the conclusion that what we need in education is a much better understanding of students and learning from a motivational perspective, from a psychological perspective. In education, the one thing we know how to measure best is IQ. But what if doing well in school and in life depends on much more than your ability to learn quickly and easily? So I left the classroom and I went to graduate school to become a psychologist. I started studying kids and adults in all kinds of super challenging settings. And in every study, my question was, who is successful here and why? My research team and I went to West Point Military Academy. We tried to predict which cadets would stay in military training and which would drop out. We went to the National Spelling Bee and tried to predict which children would advance farthest in competition. We studied rookie teachers working in really tough neighborhoods, asking which teachers are still going to be here in teaching by the end of the school year. And of those, who will be the most effective at improving learning outcomes for their students? We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. In all those very different contexts, one characteristic emerged as a significant predictor of success. And it wasn't social intelligence, it wasn't good looks, physical health, and it wasn't IQ. It was grit. Grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality. Grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint. A few years ago, I started studying grit in the Chicago public schools. I asked thousands of high school juniors to take grit questionnaires, and then waited around more than a year to see who would graduate. Turns out that grittier kids were significantly more likely to graduate, even when I matched them on every characteristic I could measure. Things like family income, standardized achievement test scores, even how safe kids felt when they were at school. So it's not just at West Point or the National Spelling Bee that grit matters, it's also in school, especially for kids at risk for dropping out. To me, the most shocking thing about grit is how little we know, how little science knows about building it. Every day, parents and teachers ask me, how do I build grit in kids? What do I do to teach kids a solid work ethic? How do I keep them motivated for the long run? The honest answer is, I don't know. What I do know is that talent doesn't make you gritty. Our data show very clearly that there are many talented individuals who simply do not follow through on their commitments. In fact, in our data, grit is usually unrelated or even inversely related to measures of talent. So far, the best idea I've heard about building grit in kids is something called growth mindset. This is an idea developed at Stanford University by Carol Dweck, and it is the belief that the ability to learn is not fixed, that it can change with your effort. Dr. Dweck has shown that when kids read and learn about the brain and how it changes and grows in response to challenge, they're much more likely to persevere when they fail because they don't believe that failure is a permanent condition. So growth mindset is a great idea for building grit, but we need more. And that's where I'm going to end my remarks, because that's where we are. That's the work that stands before us. We need to take our best ideas, our strongest intuitions, and we need to test them. We need to measure whether we've been successful, and we have to be willing to fail, to be wrong, to start over again with lessons learned. In other words, we need to be gritty about getting our kids grittier.
My philosophy on life, I try to just take everything as it comes. Not to be too serious or stress out over any little thing, but definitely try to appreciate everything for what it's worth. Try to enjoy every moment. It was in October, and I was covering India Battery 312. And that morning we stepped off on a foot patrol, and I heard mortar fire coming down, and then saw dirt fly up after an explosion went off, and after that, everything went black. I heard the corpsman yelling my name, so I knew I was still alive. I've definitely been through some things and came back to talk about it, and because of that, people respect me for it. But also, I think it added to my character. I feel like I have a bright future in the Marine Corps ahead of me, and I still feel like there's a lot that I can still do. There's no limit for my future.